morning, fellow diggers. Just coming to the end of July, out here in my hometown, getting a should be a really nice orange sunrise this morning in. And I thought I'd do a little August wholesomely foreboding astrology preview for you. I'm doing another one because the last few months I've been doing my wholesome astrology thing, and rather than targeting a auspicious date each month, I'm targeting a non-auspicious date each month. The most apocalypse enabling red flag day for the astrology each month. Just because, you know, everything needs balance. We're living in duality. Can't have all this love and light stuff, can we? Although there isn't arguably too much of that going right now. Anyway, so I'm doing this because, well, myself and basically every other serious astrologer basically picked the red flag date for last month. Well, not quite, almost. So last month it was the Mars-Uranus conjunction, which happened at the end of tropical Taurus and the start of sidereal Taurus. Although more importantly, in the visible sky, the conjunction was very closely conjunct to Algol. It's also called the demon star, the mythological head of Medusa. Astrology is neutral, but some luminaries, some archetypes have a bit more of an edge than others do, and it's fair to say that Algol is one of those. It doesn't have a good rep, basically modern or ancient astrology, take your pick. Mars-Uranus, action, assertiveness. The shadow comes out in aggression, uncontrolled anger, violence, and then with Uranus it's things that are sudden and spontaneous, not entirely thought through, acting in the moment. Definitely Mars-Uranus is acting in the moment. But one of the key things was how closely this conjunction hit a lot of very important people in the world, two of which have had their career trajectories changed quite significantly within the last month, which is the two former presidential, no, one still isn't. What was then the two presidential candidates for the US election in November 2024. Orange Man and Sleepy Joe. Of course, the Orange Man had a very near miss, a near headshot, which was interesting because the astrology said that was in the cards. Mars-Uranus on Algol was happening right on his midheaven, which is the highest part of the Skyclock, I guess, when we are born, where we're most visible, where we're most seen, where our career, where our reputation is. And this conjunction on the demon star Algol was happening on that highest point in the sky. The other notable, as I said, was Sleepy Joe, whose current iteration, clone, hologram, CGI deepfake version came down with the Rona. And this conjunction was, I think, opposite his natal sun in Scorpio. And he has since it passed his opposition, got the Rona. A lot of people thought he was dead. Might be, might not be. Who knows in this place anymore? But did indeed, in the end, announce that he was not, or that it was not running for the presidential election in 2020. So two pretty big sinks there, and basically all happened around that sort of 1 week period across the peak of that conjunction, sort of give or take 3 or 4 days from the 15th of July. So, what do we have this time around? Anything near as spicy as that highly spicy Mars-Uranus conjunction. Good question. Let's walk. I'll tell you. So before we get to our date, we're going to need some context here. And it's pretty significant context as well. When I was getting into astrology, one of the first red pills, I guess, that there was absolutely something valid and real here was the unfoldment of the plan, scam, whatever, demic in 2020. And that was an absolutely outrageous astrological period of time. And sort of going back, you know, it was one of the main validations of astrology, you know, of this ancient form of pattern recognition using the natural cycles that are observable and visible to us. You know, I guess that was probably, and it's no surprise that astrology has really taken off, you know, probably since 2020, given the validation that it received. So the context was a big daddy conjunction between Saturn and Pluto. You know, pretty difficult. So basically the reset, the platonic death and rebirth of the Saturn cycle, yes, the deepest, most subconscious manifestation of the great adversary archetypally with Pluto. So, you know, serious stuff, and doesn't happen very often. Saturn takes 29 years to do its thing, to rotate, and Pluto moves on a bit in that time. So you sort of got, you know, every 30-ish years or so you have this cycle. And it basically happened across the turn of 2020, the year of clear vision, of seeing the world clearly and unmistakably for what it is. Eventually, for most people, took a while, but I think we're sort of getting there now. So that was the sort of broader context. It was that conjunction, but there were a lot of things happening around that. So we actually had an almost total solar eclipse across Christmas Day and Boxing Day of 2019, which was pretty much exactly conjunct Jupiter and almost exactly trine Uranus. So this Jupiter-Uranus vibe, which obviously was reactivated this year around the time of the eclipse with the Jupiter-Uranus conjunction. Anyway, so this really quite notable eclipse, and then that sort of moved into this broader Saturn-Pluto conjunction. So you got Jupiter there as well, but also Mars. Mars sort of flies into the picture. So you've got these two, so you've got Pluto, then you've got Saturn and Mars, the two malefics, and then Jupiter, the sort of great benefic. So it's interesting, very powerful, obviously, combination of archetypes going on here. And you sort of see these series of conjunctions between these four planets, between Pluto, Saturn, Jupiter and Mars, sort of unfold across the first few months of 2020, and how closely those conjunctions link to the unfoldment of the pandemic. So very obvious, very sort of, you know, you can sort of see it happening, and people were saying this in the lead up to 2020, and then bang, it happened. What's maybe more interesting, but I won't go into detail, is, you know, how the astrology community then sort of reacted to the pandemic and how they interpreted it, which maybe wasn't quite as good as their ability to predict the pandemic. But anyway, maybe we can do that in another video. Long story short, we had this big boy series of conjunctions in the context of, you know, this very heavy Saturn-Pluto conjunction, and that was the archetypal context for the pandemic and everything that followed. So where are we now? I would sort of pin, if we're going to sort of talk about, you know, the harshest sort of thing, the harshest part of that period of time, which was these, you know, worldwide basically lockdowns that came out. You know, who was responsible? Who were the main planets responsible? So obviously Pluto, because it was one of the most intense transformative experiences that, you know, modern human society has had, fair to say. But we got, I guess, these two malefics, you know, Mars and Saturn. If we think about that combination, Mars is, you know, aggression, can be very forceful, very assertive, and Saturn is restriction, sort of limiting what can be done. So it's an interesting sort of combination, but if you put together, we can have these sort of like, this idea of like aggressive, authoritarian restrictions coming in. So you can see very clearly how, you know, obviously the two malefics, but also just putting those two together, you can see how that can come out in some sort of lockdown, sort of grinding to a halt, sort of, you know, with a lot of sort of like conflict and tension in that stopping, very uneasy, and a lot of sort of, it comes with a lot of sort of resentment and ill will, I guess, is also one way to put it. Look out there that we're heading to. So I think Mars and Saturn is, you know, significant if we're going to try and follow this on and see where things might lead into the future, if we're going to have potentially, again, I'm not going to say on any particular predictor here, but just to sort of flag potential sort of red flag dates or periods of time. So one, I actually, when I was doing my video for back in April, remember April? What a shit show that was. We had the eclipse, we had Jupiter Uranus, obviously, so a Chiron eclipse, conjunct line, but also had a Mars-Saturn conjunction just, I think, 2 days after that Chiron themed eclipse. And that was combined with the Mercury retrograde and just a bunch of other things going on, so I sort of flagged potential for potential some re-emergence of lockdowns just across that period. It didn't happen, which is probably because archetypally we had that Jupiter-Uranus conjunction, which is, you know, basically the opposite of a lockdown. You know, it's sort of sudden, spontaneous, liberative expansion in our beliefs, in our ability to find meaning, our ability to sort of take in the world, find order or a sense of coherence, and from that things like, you know, meaning, hope, optimism. So having that Jupiter-Uranus thing probably wasn't going to allow anything lockdown related to happen. Which brings us to now. So Mars and Jupiter have both since moved on, and now we have an upcoming square. You know, this sort of the quintessential Mars aspect, where there's tension and there's a bit of conflict and there's sort of just, you know, things that have to be worked through in between the archetypes in question. So we're having this sort of next iteration of Mars-Saturn, roughly sort of in the middle of August. It goes exact, maybe sort of like 15th, 16th, around there, but sort of, yeah, like mid-August. What's very interesting is that when that square happens, specifically the 14th of August, Mars will also catch up and become exactly conjunct with Jupiter. So we have 3 of our 4 suspicious characters, lockdown characters, in play all of a sudden, in a very notable, very sort of stark arrangement, I guess you might say. So I thought that was worth flagging, just the fact that this square happens just, you know, as the Mars Jupiter is going exact as well. If we sort of expand our look at the sky at that time, we see a few other things which sort of make it just a bit spicy, particularly the moon. We find with these red flag days, almost always we have the moon, you know, just play a very mischievous, sneaky role, very provocative role, and sort of move into alignments, because it is a fast moving planet. It seems to just have a very good knack of moving into certain spicy locations at the right time. And indeed, as this Mars-Jupiter conjunction is going essentially exact, the moon will be exactly opposing it. And you'll see that, you know, literally within like a few minutes of a few degrees, as Mars Jupiter goes exact. So we have a T-square. We have a T-square for the moon to Mars Jupiter, with the great adversary still in retrograde at the apex of that T-square. We go one step further and we look into the fourth corner of that arrangement. We find Venus. Venus in Virgo. Being a bit of a bitch, let's be honest. Forming a very juicy looking Grand Cross. Mutable tropical, a mutable Grand Cross, nonetheless. But yeah. So you can see it. When I first saw it, I was like, oh, it just looks like, I know, it looked like almost a celestial stop sign, I guess. Be one way to put it. What do you think? Sometimes the geometry of the Skyclock can almost make the archetypes themselves sort of secondary. You know, sometimes it just helps not to overthink things and just to, you know, look at the sky from a geocentric perspective, from a perspective that we have, you know, energetic luminaries going on, forming very intricate, you might say, sacred geometrical relationships. And that is the heart of astrology. That is what I believe is the heart of astrology. It's not these tropical signs, it's not equal houses, projections. It is what we can see. And if we looked at the sky on the 14th of August, we'll see this big fat cross in the sky. And a few other things as well. We also have the previously mentioned Uranus. Forming squares to both the Sun and Mercury. Again, not like bad, but just with Uranus squares, things can happen very quickly. There's a lot of, it's like when especially the Uranus Mercury just felt like this, like, it's like spark of provocative, controversial, revolutionary ideas just like crackling in the air. So this potential for things, for like an idea or a thought or even a meme, just to spread really quickly and take hold and almost go out of control. What's also interesting is that Mercury will be at, I think, basically 0 degrees Virgo, which is where the fixed star Regulus is. Which means that Mercury on that day will be on Orange Man's, the Moon Child's ascendant. Which means that Uranus obviously is still on his midheaven. So he's got this Uranus-Mercury square going on from his midheaven to his ascendant. And also the Mars-Jupiter will be exactly pretty much within a degree of his natal Uranus. So a lot of Uranus activation going on in the Moon Child's chart. And the Moon itself is about a few degrees away from his natal eclipsed blood moon. He was of course born in the middle of a total lunar eclipse. A very notorious total lunar eclipse. So there's still that activation going on there as well. Yeah. So that's all I've got, pretty much. What I will say is that we got 3 of the 4 from 2020. Where's Pluto? It's a good question, because Pluto doesn't have any bad or any really provocative, you might say, alignments. What it does have is a minor grand trine to the 2 other outer planets, so Neptune and Uranus. And this is the configuration, the sort of minor grand trine, that will essentially be in place as each of those 3 planets make their transition to their new tropical signs over the next 2 years. Pluto will go first. It's at 0 degrees Aquarius now in retrograde. He'll go back into the last degree of Capricorn just for the 2024 election, pretty much, to oversee the final election, quite possibly the final president. And then it'll do its thing back in Aquarius for good. Neptune will, of course, move into Aries as it essentially holds hands with Saturn. So across basically the last degree of the zodiac, Neptune and Saturn will basically do that together in 2025, which could be interesting. And then finally, Uranus will move from Taurus into Gemini and finish that by 2026. So this is the new astrological age that we're entering. Very airy from a tropical perspective. So what the things that are sort of happening now are sort of moving us towards whatever this new sort of age is, this sort of harmonized outer planetary alignment. So these things that are happening now are essentially transitioning us into this stage. So whatever does happen, if something does happen around mid-August, think of it in the context, this greater context about this new stage that we're passing into. Alright, that's all I've got. Enjoy your August. Stay safe. Stay alert. Hold on to the levity, the fun, the enjoyment that comes with being alive in interesting, mildly to slightly more threateningly apocalyptic times that we seem to be moving into. Right. You guys.